Hi, I'm Dr. Kelly Kessler, and I am the host of the podcast, Rewiring Health. This podcast is devoted to giving you expert information around nervous system regulation, subconscious mind reprogramming, and a variety of health topics so that you can optimize your life. Stop feeling burnt out, overwhelmed, in pain, and start living your life where you can remain successful without compromising your health. From experiencing a stroke to become an Ironman athlete, Ali Flynn is the epitome of resilience. On top of that, she has overcome some tremendous adversity in her life and still has this beautiful spirit about herself that inspires so many. I learned so much from Ali, and I'm so grateful for the conversation we had. It went into so much depth of how beautiful the human spirit is, especially when it's up against some really tremendous battles. Ali Flynn is an extraordinary individual who has transformed her life of trauma into a powerful force for inspiring others. Drawing from her personal journey of resilience and determination, Ali influences others with her unwavering belief that obstacles can be overcome. Her story is one of grit and willpower, showcasing her remarkable triumph over enormous adversities to become a self-made entrepreneur. This is an episode you do not want to miss. It was absolutely tremendous about how much strength Ali has and the things that she's overcome in her life. And I'm so grateful she's sharing her story to inspire others who may be going through something really, really hard right now and are wondering how to get through it. This will really inspire you and give you hope that some of the biggest obstacles can be overcome. High achievement does not come without a price tag, and sometimes it's our health. If you're wondering the style of high achiever you are, take my free quiz in the show notes. Welcome back to another episode of Rewiring Health. So honored to have Ali Flynn here. We connected a few weeks ago on Ali's podcast, and it's just such an honor to have you here, Ali.
Thank you. It is, as soon as I saw your face come on the screen, there was just this it was just this, it's like a long lost friend, even though we've only just met. It feels like we just could chat all day. So thank you. And I'm really looking forward to today.
Yes, me too. And it's so like I literally felt the same way. Like we are literally on the opposite side of the globe right now. And it's so true. When you connect to somebody, you just feel this energy. And I felt that with you too. So I know this is just going to be such an awesome conversation and just so valuable to so many people. So I want to dive right in. One thing that we're going to talk about is resiliency and how you can cultivate resiliency in your life. And I would just love for you to share your story of how you have cultivated resiliency in your life.
Yeah, well, it's funny that this is the topic that we're talking about at the moment, because I'm in the middle of running a course on resilience, and it's really challenged me to think about what do we think, what does the everyday language mean in resilience? It's the ability to bounce back. It's the ability to overcome adversity or navigate your way through adversity. But there are so many components of it. And through the course that I'm running, I've actually really dived deep into the internal world. So our internal thoughts, our internal emotions, our internal strengths. And someone said to me the other day, "Oh, I just wanted to know how to deal with the outside world." And I was like, yes, but how we deal with the outside world really comes from what's within, and getting really clear and understanding what happens within your soul, within your heart, within your mind, so that you can leverage that at a time that you need it. And one of the things that I see often is that we forget to fill our bucket back up. So when adversity hits, we're pulling from an empty bucket instead of, grabbing water out of a full bucket and only taking a little bit out. So, one of the things that I really think about first and foremost with resilience is how do we fill our bucket up on a daily basis so that it is nice, full, overflowing, lots of water in it, so that when adversity comes, you're kind of not on empty already. So that it's really interesting because it's really in my world at the moment, the word resilience, with this course. But I guess for me, when I think about it, one of the times in my life that it really showed up and I really needed to pull on my resilience and really question it and work out what tools I already had within was when I was 32, I ended up having a stroke. I had this rare brain condition called reversible vasoconstriction syndrome, which I think is more common now. But back then in Australia, there was very few people that had been diagnosed. And I live in a rural town about 5 hours from our main cities. And yeah, not very many people here at all. And no doctors would have known what it was. And I was getting ready to run a boot camp. At the time, I was a fitness trainer. This was after I'd been in psychology. I'd stepped away from being a therapist because I had young kids, and I'd stepped into the world of personal training, so I could still help people without having that kind of heaviness of therapy and that
Yeah.
commitment of therapy, because you have to be very committed as a therapist, so that you can meet that client through that whole journey. So I was working as a PT, a personal trainer, and I was upstairs getting ready to run a boot camp, putting on my doing my hair, and just gotten out of the shower, and I had this headache on my left and these pins and needles down my right. Like, and when I say headache, I knew in that moment that my life was in danger. I knew I was in deep shit. And I screamed out to my husband, and he came running up, and he had exactly the same response. So whatever it was about that
Mm.
was big enough for both of us to say, my life is in danger. And
Oh my
he
gosh.
worked in the hospital. He was a radiographer, sonographer. So he was quite familiar with strokes and heart attacks and, kind of that crisis zone. And he thought straight away, she's having a stroke. But I was young, I was fit, I was healthy, I was a fitness instructor. So a very quick thought that came over the top of she's having a stroke is there's no way, you know?
Right.
And
Yeah.
yeah. And so we bundled the three kids into the car and we drove into town, which is about 7 Ks. And I just remember looking at the speedo thinking, we're going to die here, because he was going so fast, way over the speed limit. But he knew that I was in strife.
Mhm.
By the time I got to the hospital, I couldn't recognize anyone. I couldn't recognize his work colleagues, couldn't recognize my mum. But again, being so young and fit, they thought that I must have had a migraine.
Mm.
And the next day, when the doctor came in, he was talking to me, and I said, "Oh, I can't see you." And he moved. I said, "Oh, there you are." And that was in that moment he said, "We need an MRI." Because
Oh
I'd
my
lost vision
gosh.
in both quadrants of my eyes, and I'd lost my short term memory as a result of the stroke that I'd had. They took me for an MRI, and it showed up that I'd had a stroke. So they flew me to the closest city hospital, where I spent quite a few months in hospital. There were moments I couldn't read and write, stand on one leg. I really felt like I started back at the beginning. And I had three young children under 3.5. My baby was still on the boob when this happened.
Gosh. Wow.
Yeah. So it was at the time, I was so sick, I probably didn't process a lot of that. My husband was. He was processing, what will our life look like? What happens if she doesn't get out of hospital? But for me, it was very much moment by moment, hour by hour, day by day. Just how can I work out what's going on? How can I start to learn to stand? How can I start to learn to read? So, when I think about adversity and I think about um, that ability to feel like you have resilience within you, I think about that time, because that took a lot of resilience to kind of bounce back. I felt like I was starting at zero, in more ways than one,
Mhm.
psychologically, physically,
Yeah.
emotionally, self identity. you know
Yeah.
so I'd gone from, I'd studied an undergrad in psychology and a postgrad in emotionally focused therapy. And I, had a whole career that, yes, I'd stepped away to have babies, but I had every intention of going back. And when you can't read, or when you can't write, when you can't, stand on one leg, you kind of go, what does my future hold for me? What does this look like? Um, yeah.
Wow.
So
Yeah, I'm just saying it's just incredible. Like as you're speaking, I'm like getting goosebumps because it's just like, it's just putting yourself in that position. Like I'm like thinking of like how if I would feel if I was experiencing what you're experiencing. And it's incredible to have, everything's going well and you're living your life and then like in an instant everything changes and now you have to figure out how do we move forward in this.
mm,
And
yeah.
just incredible. So after all that happened, what was your first step towards moving forward?
Yeah, so I remember being in ICU, and in Australia, I'm not sure what it's like over there. We have all these beds that go around in a circle, and you can see the doctor station in the middle. So you don't kind of have privacy because they need to keep an eye on you all the time. I was in the neuro
Yeah.
ICU ward, and I remember thinking, I'm the only person in here that can stand up and walk to the toilet.
Mhm.
Everyone else wasn't able to move. And I woke up in the middle of the night at about midnight one night and thought, what am I doing here? Like, am I ever going to get out of here? And it was in that moment I rang a friend. I was in tears. Someone had needed to be resuscitated in the bed next to me and actually passed away.
Oh
And I
my
remember
gosh.
thinking, I'm never going to get out. Like, what am I doing here? And because I had a short term memory loss, I couldn't remember why I was there. So I knew I had 3 kids. I knew I had a husband. I knew everything that had been in my life previously up until that moment. But any new information that was coming in just was like in one ear, out the other. And that was when I was like, I need to be doing more here. I need to get to work on, I'm going to be the only person that can get me out of this. So I need to learn everything I can. So it was from that moment that it really sparked this curiosity in me. And I started asking a lot more questions of the doctors. I started writing it down or getting someone to write it down for me because I couldn't write properly at that stage. And I'd say things like, what do you know about this condition? Where can we find out more information? You know, what have other people done in the past? How have they gotten through it? Because there was this condition, the reversible vasoconstriction syndrome, which lasts for 4 months of your life and it's meant to never come back. So the stroke, there's only 5% of people that have a stroke, and I was just in that 5%.
Oh
So I
my
was kind
gosh.
of battling two things. Over that 4 months, I was quite sick, and I used to have these like seizures and, well, pseudo seizures. My body would shake, and I would not have access to be able to move my limbs, and I wouldn't be able to speak. And there were all these frightening moments. I had pins and needles all over my body. My vision would go consistently over and over throughout the day, but they kept saying in 4 months' time that should pass, and then we need to recover from the stroke.
Wow.
So um I there's another part to the story. When I had my stroke, there was a really key component. I didn't know this at the start. When I started my rehab journey, and it will be really relevant when I get to it,
Yeah.
I didn't know this was holding me back so much. So I grew up in my childhood. I was sexually assaulted for a couple of years when I was 5 by a really close family member. And my whole life, I had told myself, you can touch my body, but you can't touch my mind. You can't hurt what's inside my head. And I had that little mantra as a kid. And so I really got to work on getting smarter. That was in my head what I said to myself as a kid, right? I'm going
Yeah.
to get smarter. You can't touch my mind. You can do all of these things. But if I get smart, I'll be able to get out of this situation and I'll be able to make a go of my life. So I worked really hard at school. That's why I went and got a couple of degrees. I mean, if you look at it now, I'm such a nerd, cannot get enough information. It comes from that. But what happened when I had my stroke was I felt like they took that. I felt like they took my mind. I felt like I didn't have this mantra and this fire within my belly that I'd used my whole life as a coping skill, all of a sudden had been stripped away from me. And I felt like I was naked and I felt like I had nothing to give. And it wasn't until I took the time to process that and think about that and to work out that I had this little voice and this little mantra inside my head, um, that was holding me back,
Mhm.
because I'm the only one that was telling me that, right? Like that was a story I'd created. That was a story that I lived by. And it makes sense when you hear my story, but it was
Mhm.
no longer serving me. It
Yeah.
was no longer serving me because I actually needed my body at this point in time to be able to help my mind.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. You just have such tremendous insight. And that's why I found like you're, as you're speaking, it's like to have that insight that like understanding that the story that you're telling yourself was holding you back, like that's just tremendous to understand yourself to that extent. I think it's amazing that and also to have the curiosity in the process too. There's just so many things that like it's just scream resilience. Like that literally is it. And just all these little tools that you have that were helping you along the way.
And I think you said it there when you said curiosity. Like my insight isn't
Yeah.
there initially. Like it's almost like I'm completely oblivious to it and I'm just in operation mode. But
Mhm.
what happens is I realize that something's not happening. I realize that I'm not moving forwards, or I realize that I'm being really reactive, or I realize that I feel like something's holding me back and I feel really weighted. And it's
Mhm.
in that moment that I say, let's explore this a little bit more and find out what's going on. And that moment, I still remember that moment that I worked out about that mindset and that core belief that I'd been carrying. And I just started sobbing, like seriously sobbing. So I don't want to, for anyone that's listening, I don't want you to think that that was an easy journey. It was really hard when I realized that
Mhm.
I felt like they'd taken my mind. It was like I was back there as a little kid again, and that, someone had robbed me again of something that I didn't think was fair. And, so it was very hard. The heartache in that moment was massive, but it was through that heartache and through that full body kind of emotional experience that I was able to then lift up and out. So it was after that I was able to kind of go, okay, let's take stock. And this is something that's really important when adversity hits, that we acknowledge that we are playing a different game. So we might have been playing hockey for the last 3 years, but when that adversity hits, we're now playing tennis. And have we stopped to look at the rules? And have we stopped to see what the court is that we're playing on and who our opponent is, you know? So what I think is really important is to take stock, take a moment, take a breath and say, okay, we are in a different spot right now. This is a different chapter, a different spot. What do I need?
Mm-hmm.
Who have I got in my world? What more information do I need? And what can I be doing here, even if it's tiny? And it's that old saying of like, what is one step you can take? If you could only do one thing right now that's going to get you one step closer to your goal, what is that one step? And for me back then, it was standing on my leg for 20 seconds
Mm-hmm.
consistently. That was my one thing. And then once I could do that, it was standing on it for 1 minute. And then once I could do that, it was learning to read those old spot books. You know, I don't know if you have them
Yeah.
over in America.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember my daughter at the time was trying to read the spot books, and I'd sit up there
Wow.
with her trying to learn to read it. I remember thinking it's okay because once
Yeah.
I can read spot, I can read the next book, and then I can read the next book, and then I can read a novel. And then, I don't have to go from the red to the green. If you think about traffic lights, red,
Mm-hmm.
orange, green, I don't have to jump from the red to the green. I just have to move up the red one and then
Mm-hmm.
up just get a little bit closer to the orange. And once I get really close to the orange, how do I just hop over into the orange? So I'm so grateful I had a background in psych and PT because I was really able to harness that kind of, I guess, advice that I'd given to people for so long,
Mm-hmm.
and really had to embrace that myself and say, forget forget the end result, know what that is,
Mm-hmm.
but let's strip it right back to the here and now.
Yeah.
Be
Wow.
strategic, but be present.
Mm-hmm. That's
Yeah.
it's just incredible, like the strength that you, and I know it's like just that journey of having just so much strength in each little moment, and just share like it's, I'm trying to like capture like how, because like what you're like as you're speaking, it's just like there's so many things, like the fear of the unknown, the processing the things that happened in your childhood and try to work through that, and now playing a different game and trying to learn how to do that. And there's just so many things that were going on at that time. And for you to be able to break it down step by step is just what a gift to yourself, to be able to recognize like how tremendous that is, that you don't have to overload your system. You just have to do the smallest thing to move yourself forward. And for anyone who's going through anything in life, like that is huge right there. And to honor what you need in that moment.
And the little mantra that I have in that space that sums that
Mhm.
up is trust the process. Just
Mm.
trust the process, that if you do it one step at a time, you'll get there. Don't that you have to kind of lean into that
Yeah.
because you don't know. At the
Right.
time, you don't know. And
Mhm.
and as you were saying that, I was thinking too, it was really important that I found my purpose.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of, you know, talk in industry at the moment around live your life, live your purpose. But in this moment, when I talk about find my purpose, I just needed my purpose for that chapter. And my
Mhm.
purpose was so strong. My why was so strong. I wanted to get home to my 3 children and husband.
Mhm.
That was all. That was what drove me. But what that allowed me to do was, once I realized that that was my why, it allowed the hard days to be a little bit easier. They were still hard,
Mhm.
but it
Yeah.
gave me a reason to get up in the morning. It gave
Mhm.
me a reason to, when I fell over, to be like, nope, get back up. You got this.
Yeah.
You want to be home with your husband and children, and that is your goal right now. So bringing that, like that reason why and that purpose right back down to this chapter, to
Mhm.
this moment in time, so that you're not so far stretched that it seems like you can't touch it, or it's too far away, or it's unrealistic.
Mhm. Yeah, it almost sounds like your sense of purpose anchored you down.
Mm.
And then even if anything kind of hit you off, you were anchored enough to get back up. And
Yeah.
that's just, it's amazing when you have a strong enough why, and things to live for and things to work for, what you're capable of in that moment, and to keep moving yourself forward. That's just absolutely tremendous.
And, it didn't do it alone either. Like, this is one
Mhm.
of the, and we might get to it later, but I've had a couple of adversities since then, a couple of big, big balls thrown my way. And one of the things that I have learned over time with multiple adversity is, who have I got in my corner? And again, we're playing a different sport, remember? So
Mhm.
who you needed as your coach and who you needed to cheer you on might look differently in this moment. And I think about it like a board of directors. So if you're sitting at the table, who are the people that you've got sitting around you, guiding you, providing you with wisdom, providing you with that motivation and inspiration to keep going? And when a time like that hits, like you have a stroke or you lose your job or you have a marriage breakdown, have a think about who's sitting around my table right now. And do I actually have the right players here? Do I need to sub someone out and sub someone in? And that's okay.
Hmm.
That's not saying that they're not your friend or that you haven't had this long-standing relationship. It's just right now in this moment in my life, I need key players around me to get me through it.
Hmm.
And I need to stop and assess, have I got the right people in place right now? And if you
Yeah.
don't know who they are, go looking. Like
Hmm.
if you're like, I need a nutritionalist or I need an exercise physiologist or a physio, ask the questions of people like, who do you know that's the best in this space?
Hmm.
um that's always my question, who's the best?
Yeah.
And why are they
Absolutely.
the best? Is it technical, or is it, what is it about them that makes them the best, and how do I get in contact with them, and who can help
Yeah.
me do that?
As far as going off of that, how much do you believe that advocacy for yourself played a role in your recovery?
Oh, so I in my with my stroke, when I came back to the regional setting, we didn't have really strong rehab here. So
Mhm,
definitely once I got back, I kind of just had to do it on my own. I had to,
mhm,
but where what comes up for me when you ask that is 2 years ago, I got diagnosed with POTS, postural orthostatic
mhm,
tachycardia syndrome. And what that looked like, and this is really relevant for that question, what
mhm,
that looked like was I'd been competing in half Ironman. So for those that don't know, that's a 2K swim, a 90K bike ride, and a 21K run. And in Australia, the one that I competed in was usually about 35, 36-degree heat. So it's quite an extreme event
mhm,
that you train for months for to go to. And I had just completed my half iron, was feeling great. And 3 weeks later, I got a pain in my leg. And I went to the physio to be like, hey, I think I've got a tendinopathy. I'm not sure what's going on. And she looked at me a few times over a few months and then said, look, this is above my pay grade. You need to see a neurologist. Something bigger is going on here. And it took me about 18 months to get diagnosed. And that's what I think about when you say advocacy, because in Australia, the average person from this, I was speaking to someone yesterday from the foundation, and I think, don't quote me on this, but I think it's 6.5 years for the average female to get diagnosed with this
wow.
condition. And I got diagnosed in
Yeah.
18 months, but that is because I pushed hard and I was my own case manager and I didn't take no as an answer. I knew I was sick.
Mhm,
One of the doctors said to me, oh, you just need to get over your childhood trauma. And I was like, mate, this has
mhm.
nothing to do with my childhood trauma.
Yeah.
Like, I am sick. I had pins and needles
Mm,
in all four limbs. I couldn't stand up. I couldn't have a
mhm.
shower on my 40th birthday. I couldn't even sit up to have a cup of tea with my children. I thought
Oh my
that
god.
I was dying a slow death. And that advocacy piece and that case management piece really came up for me there. And that's when I realized that no one else cares as much as you.
Mhm,
So you need to be really clear, collect all your information, think about what questions you want to
mm,
ask how you contact them after you leave the appointment. Like, it's almost like you need to work it to find out your answers.
yeah. Well, as you're speaking, I mean, there's so many things that were like coming into my head. One thing that I just want to acknowledge you for is the fact that you had a stroke and you were in that dark, dark place, and now you're doing Ironmans. I mean, tremendous, tremendous. I like it's amazing. So for anyone who's in a place, I mean, if that's not a beacon of hope that you can overcome the most awful things in your life and still triumph in that, I mean, that's just absolutely amazing that to go from where you were to doing that. I mean, so much like respect for you in doing that. Absolutely tremendous. And one theme that I've heard as you're speaking is how much you took an active role in everything that you've done. And I find sometimes, especially in like the medical system, I know at least here, it's very much like we relinquish our power to external forces. Like, you are the authority figure, you know better than I do, and I'll just trust that you're going to do the best thing for me. And what you've said, and again, it's a testament to what you've done and what accomplished, is that you've taken an active role. Like, you knew the people that could guide you, but you also were taking an active role in your recovery. And I really think that's absolutely tremendous that you didn't relinquish your power to someone who maybe did not have your best interest in mind or wasn't going to push as hard as you were going to push for yourself.
Mm. And, that's where that, when I mentioned earlier that I love study and I'm a bit of a nerd burger, that's where that comes in as
Mhm.
well, because I I get really tenacious in
Mhm.
studying and learning. And it's not, people say, don't go to Google for medical, but I go to Google and ask questions like, what should I be asking here? What
Mhm.
questions do I need to ask the doctor, as opposed to what's wrong with me? It's like, how can I learn more about what my next step is?
Yeah.
If I've got a neurologist appointment, what do I need to know when I walk into that appointment
Mhm.
about everything that all the information I've got so far? How can I do my research so that when I walk in, I can say to them, like, here, this is where I'm at. Where are we at? What do I need to know? How do I move forwards in this space?
Yeah, so important there. That is such a golden nugget because when we come prepared, like I don't know how it is there, but I know the doctor's appointments here, especially neurologists, it takes months to book them and then you're in and out in 5 minutes. And many people that I've worked with are like, oh my gosh, I wanted to ask this and this and this. And I felt so flustered that I didn't even get it out. So
Mm.
preparing for that is absolutely crucial. And also the power of knowledge. Like when we know something and we learn more about ourselves, it takes that fear down, and now we're not living on the unknown and questioning and worrying. Now we're building ourselves up to know how to move forward. So I love that you took the steps to do that.
And also, as I was thinking then, it's also really, which is again bringing us back to that resilience course where I said it's about us understanding ourselves and our internal dialogue and our internal strengths. One of my greatest strengths is my drive. I
Mhm.
have this incredible innate drive that when I've got my eyes on something, I'm going to work really hard and see if I can get there. It doesn't matter if I do or I don't, but it's like I'm going to give it what I can.
Yeah.
Someone next to me may not have that drive, and that's okay.
Mhm.
And when you say that about going to the neurologist, some people don't like to process until the information's given to them. And
Mhm.
that's okay too. But I guess for everyone listening, ask the questions about yourself. When am I at my best, and what surrounds that, and what do I need in that space, and what are my strengths? Because if you're someone that likes to have the information, that likes to come in prepared, that likes to challenge the situation and make sure it's being looked at from all angles, it's really important that you do that in your recovery process or your diagnosis process. But if you're someone that's like, I like to not think about it until it's actually tangibly in front of me, when I can measure it and I can manage it, that's completely okay too. But be okay with not doing the research first.
Mhm.
Be okay with coming into a doctor's appointment and being landed something and being like, whoa, now I wish I'd asked X, Y, and Z.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and just so important to recognize what is best for you because everyone does approach it differently, but 100% the whole thing is knowing yourself well enough to know how to move yourself forward in the process. I
Yeah.
just just want to ask you a question because I know like innately, like, or, maybe not innately, but you have that drive, you have that like go getter, attitude, fire in your gut. Like for someone who struggles with that, maybe that's not their natural, state, or they just feel like that doesn't come as naturally. How can someone start to cultivate that where they can feel like they can become more resilient? They can really start getting that drive in themselves if they feel like if they're going through something that's a struggle and they really haven't had that in their life throughout most of their life.
And that comes back to knowing yourself. So
Mhm.
maybe that means you need to try and find certainty in an uncertain environment. So
Mhm.
maybe the question to ask yourself in that moment is, what helps me feel certain here? Like, what information do I know and what don't I know, and what steps am I taking in the space of what I don't know?
Mhm.
And you've probably heard this before, but I honestly come back to it, if not on a weekly basis, even maybe a daily basis, but definitely fortnightly, is
Mhm.
what can I control and what can't I control? If a problem is presented to me, whether it be a medical problem, a business problem, a fitness problem, a parent problem, I my first step is like, what's in my control and what's out of my control. And I have this little saying that says, I choose to let go of what I can't control. And I
Mhm.
have to repeat that, to be honest, quite a
Mhm.
lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes like 20 or 30 times, because I'm like frustrated that it's out of my control, and I'm kind of a bit angry that it's out of my
Mhm.
control. But then I remind myself that I don't have energy to spend on things that are outside of my control.
Mhm.
Like, and that's when your question, you said, how do, if people don't have that fire, maybe that's the first place to start, is like, what's in my control and what's out of my control, and letting go of what I can't control. And then with what I can control, what are my steps here? What are the systems or structures I can put in place? Who do I need to ask questions of? And what is my step through process? And I may only know step 1 and 2, and that's okay.
Mhm.
But do I know my step one and then my step two? And just bringing it right back to that small moment. Because when you're in the eye of adversity, when you're in the eye of the storm, it's about survival. Let's
Mhm.
be honest. It's a
Mhm.
very different space to once that storm has passed and you're in that striving mode, you're in that cleanup phase. Like if you're in the eye of the storm is hitting, you don't know whether there's going to be a hailstorm, you don't know if windows are going to be broken, if a tree's going to fall on the house, like you have no idea. So you're kind of braced and you're just kind of like doing whatever you can to get through. But then
Mhm.
once the storm passes, it's like, okay, let's clean this up. Let's chop up that tree and move it away. Let's fix the window. And that takes a very different part of your personality and a very different like environment, different people around you. And then after that, it's recognizing that you're going into the place of thriving. Because so often we sit in the eye of the storm or the post storm, the striving phase, and we forget to acknowledge that we're now thriving. That
Mhm.
actually, if we get if we don't get any better or life does not change from where we are right now, this is actually okay.
Mhm.
I'm actually doing okay here. And so having that conversation and that recognition and that acceptance for yourself to be like, yes, now we're in a completely different space and it will swing around. That storm is going to come again. It may come unexpectedly or it may come, you may get warning.
Mhm.
And that's okay because if we're here to live life, we're here for the full human experience and the lower the lows, the higher the highs. And I really believe that.
Yeah.
My joy and my contentment in life comes from the adversity, the shit stuff that I've been through,
Mhm.
they're
Yeah.
starting at zero so many times. You know, as a child, the shame and the secrecy and the trying to get through. As after the stroke, the trying to find out who I am when I can't remember a person because of my short term memory loss. I could meet someone and then not know who they are the next day. And that was horrifying to me because I'm a people person. I
Mhm.
felt like people were going to say, she doesn't care about me. And I
Mhm.
didn't want to have to tell everyone every time, oh, I've had a stroke. I've had a stroke. I've had a stroke.
Right.
And then
Mhm.
with POTS, you know, I just felt like I'd been whacked massively again. And at that time, I had three companies. I still had my, like, obviously my three kids. My husband was working core. And I was like, is this my life? Like, is this where I am now? Is this it? And the answer is definitely wasn't. But at the time, it felt like it was. I was in the eye of the storm and I did not know how long it was going to last or what it was going to look like once it had passed and how much damage had been done. But it does pass.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
does pass.
That's such a good analogy too, because when you're going through strife and turmoil in your life, it can be really easy sometimes to be like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I just get through this quicker? And why can't I think clearly? Why can't I do things better? And it can come down on yourself. But when you describe it as that you're in the storm and you're just trying to survive at that point, but it will pass. It's just such a great visual because like I said, it's so easy to come down on yourself in that time. And one thing I heard it in you, but I just wanted to ask you the question: how much did self compassion come into that, and how did that vary throughout your evolution of recovery?
Mm. I would say my self-compassion is high when I'm thriving. Like
Mhm.
I'm very like kind to myself and life is good. I struggle more when things are tough.
Mhm.
And sometimes I question and say, is that okay? Is it
Mhm.
okay? Because my drive is what gets me through. And my drive comes, unfortunately, that your greatest strength's your greatest weakness. And so the harder I drive, the less self-compassionate I am. Because I'm
Mhm.
like, I'm doing this at all costs. Like just stand
Yeah.
back and watch. I'm here. I'm gonna
Mhm.
do this. And so I believe that that has helped me in those moments, in the
Mhm.
eye of the storm, that really strong, like, I got this. I don't know how, I don't know who, I don't know when, but I'm just going to buckle down and get through this, knowing that it's going to pass. That self compassion piece, if I'm really honest, isn't there then. But
Mhm.
I am aware enough to say, okay, you can relax now.
Mhm. Yeah.
We have moved. We're playing a different game now. We're in a different chapter. We're in the recovery stage. So what do you need from you now? And being okay with when I was in the crisis zone, kind of manning up a little bit.
Mhm. Yeah, thanks for sharing that, 'cause I think I've experienced that too. It's like, why can't I just be more self-compassionate? But just to share that, like, it ebbs and flows. Like, you're gonna have times when you're not, and it's also one of those things that you have to practice a lot in that. And just going back to something you said a little bit earlier is that how your greatest adversities are just part of like your story, part of what you're going through, and you just embrace it and take it for what it is, and allow them to move through your life. And it's so ironic. I literally just finished, I don't know if you read this before, The Untethered Soul by Michael
No.
Singer, but it literally talks about that, how we can't cling on to things in life. We have to watch them pass, and we have to be an observer of our life and embrace the good, embrace the bad, and just what can we learn from them. And it literally talks about everything you just said. And it's just, that's ultimate peace, when you can take the crap that life hands you and just step back and not necessarily hold on to it like it is you, but more that this is something that you're experiencing in life. This is something that you as an observer are witnessing going on in your life. And that's what allows it to pass through you quicker and allow your energy to flow, allow you to get back to a more peaceful, harmonious time in your life. And it's like, as you're saying that, I'm like, that is literally sounds what like exactly what you did. Is you went, allowed it to go through you, and you did what you could, and then kind of surrendered the rest. And I think that's just absolutely beautiful.
But it's not easy. Like
Yes.
that is not
Yeah.
easy. I need to say that. So that usually comes a little bit later when I'm right in it. Like when it's something smaller, I have this saying, it's like let it through to the keeper. Like
Mm-hmm.
let that one through. Let that one
Mm-hmm.
through, if say for example I've had a big reaction to something, say a staff member did something and I was like, whoa, that's not the way we do it here. And then I've kind of had this big reaction because I'm nervous because my clients are going to experience my staff member in a way that I perhaps don't agree with, rightly or wrongly. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
their intention might have been good, it's just different to how I would have done it,
Mm-hmm.
and how I want the business run. And so I could have a big reaction to that. And then I might accidentally, if I'm not like in my adult self, if I'm not having a great day, I might accidentally like say something to my staff member that I'm a bit embarrassed about or a bit ashamed of, or probably wasn't the right thing to say. I just didn't hold it together well enough. And that's the moment that I might say to myself, let it through to the keeper, just own it, say that you're sorry, tell them, just be like, hey mate, sorry, I was in reaction there and I'm still processing what that was, but that probably didn't belong with you. And I'm really sorry. But then I've got to let that go. When you talk about that self-compassion, then I say, let it through to the keeper aisles, because you can't afford to hang on to that stuff every day. You have intentionally, like you've got good intentions here. It was a mistake. You were in reaction. You have gone back and you've spoken to the person and you've owned it and you've said you're sorry and you're reflecting on it. Now let it through. So that was an example of where self-compassion is easier for me when I'm in a thriving space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But when I'm in the eye of the storm, it's quite hard. And
Mm-hmm.
I just always think you can get bitter or you can get better, and you just gotta pick. Yeah, and you can't do all of this. Like if
Mm-hmm.
anyone's listening, being like, yes, I should be doing this, like don't use those words should, because like I get it wrong more than I get it right. And it's on reflection of the journey that you can kind of go back and unpack it. But through that reflection, I've been able to unpack and I can put words around it like this, so that when the next big adversity comes, I'm like, oh, that's right. I've got drive. Let's pull on that. Oh, that's
Mm-hmm.
right. My board of directors, who have I got around me at the moment? This is going on. My daughter she's got a chronic illness. She's had it for 10 years and she's been very, very ill. And when she gets sick, look, I crumble.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like a mess
Yeah.
as a mom. I don't function. Sometimes I don't even get dressed when I go to bed. Like I
Mm-hmm.
stay in my jeans and a shirt because I just don't have the energy. And I'm so sad. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
so devastated for her future and what that's going to look like. But it is being okay with that. It's being okay with, well, you know what? It's okay if you don't get dressed. If this is the worst that's going to happen in this moment while you're in the eye of the storm, your daughter is sick
Mm-hmm.
and she just needs you right now.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's that's such a powerful message, because it's those moments where it can very much be easy to come down on yourself, or like what's wrong with you.
Yeah.
But just that is a beautiful example of self-compassion, understanding that it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah.
And life is going to happen, and we just have to go with it the best we can. And we're never going to be perfect. Nothing will ever go exactly as we planned. And it's okay as long as we are going with the intent that we're trying to show up in our best selves for the people that matter. But thank you for sharing such a candid and authentic example of how it's okay to not be okay, and
Mm.
that we're human. We're just trying to learn from every experience.
And when I feel like I'm not okay, I just bubble it. I just have a conversation with myself. This might be helpful when people say, what are the, because often people say to me, but Als, what are the actual things that you do? And I'm like, I don't know. What are the actual things? One of the things that I do in that moment is I say to myself, if I'm still sleeping in my jeans in 3 weeks' time, I'm going to have a conversation with myself. I'm going
Mm-hmm.
to put my hand up and say to people, I need help. So I bubble it with a time frame.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that's what, when we look at grief, we often expect ourselves to move through grief really quickly. And it's like, it's okay not to. I often say to my friends, mate, if you're still here in 3 months' time, we're having a different conversation. But give
Mm-hmm.
yourself permission for it
Yeah.
to look however it's going to look over the next 3 months or
Mm-hmm.
whatever the time frame is for you. But putting
Mm-hmm.
that bubble around it can just give you a bit more space and permission to
Mm-hmm.
be
Yeah.
messy, to sit in the mud, to be undone, to not get it right, to be scared, to grieve, to all of those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's huge because I know it can be really like thoughts and emotions can be all over the place, and it can be like, what's wrong with me? Why am I thinking that? Why am I feeling that? And it can be very easy to like get caught up in that and be like, I should be feeling this way. I should be feeling that way. Like I should be thinking this. And I just love how you give yourself grace in that moment to be whatever feels right to you and to allow yourself to move through it at whatever timeline is right for you. And that's such a huge reminder. Like, I know I need that reminder. I'm sure everyone who's listening needs that reminder. We all need that reminder because it can be so easy to get stuck in what we think we should be doing instead of
Mm.
what is right for us. How can we honor ourselves? How can we take care of ourselves?
And when you're saying that to yourself, what we should be doing, is it what you think you should be doing or what you think other
Mhm.
people are going to judge you for doing? You know,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
that's where we've spoken about. There's been this common theme of curiosity. Maybe,
Mhm.
maybe if this is the first time you're hearing some of this stuff, just write
Mhm.
down some curious questions that you can ask yourself next time. And if you do nothing else other than just maybe pause and
Mhm.
have a bit of a reflection and be like, what's really going on for me here? And that's really interesting. I wonder why that's happening. And I wonder what am I telling myself here? And what am I actually experiencing here? And what am I feeling here? And, just doing that is a huge
Mhm.
start. It's massive.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
was thinking, yeah, we haven't also spoken about, and I know we're probably running out of time, but I probably really need to honor the space of values because that is something that guides my decisions
Yeah.
and
Ah.
creates priorities in my life. And it's probably the biggest North Star when stuff happens in my life. I go back to my values.
Mhm.
So and your values can change over time and we refine them over time. So I used to think of a value was family for me. But then when I think it was a year ago, I did values again and realized that no, it's not family. I don't talk to my perpetrators. So
Mhm.
actually, is it really family? Like, what does that word mean? It's actually connection for me.
Mhm.
So connection and experience are two of my highest values. And so when my daughter was really sick last time, when I had POTS and it was at my worst, and we actually didn't know if the two of us were going to make it, we genuinely did not know if we were going to see the year out. It was so easy for us to make family decisions because we came back to experience and we came back to connection. So, for example, we packed all of our family up and we went on a trip. It cost us a fortune,
Mhm.
thousands and thousands for 2 days or 3 days, I think it was. But it was an easy yes for us because we knew how important that experience was. We were creating memories with the family. It makes me cry just thinking about it, but we were creating memories and experiences and it was connecting with each other and that's what we wanted to remember. If we're both fine now and it seems silly
Mhm.
saying that, but at the time we were genuinely in that space. We were in the mud. We didn't know what the future held, but we came back to our values. My husband and I said, what are our core values and how do we live those? How do
Mhm.
we live our life through those? And are we doing that? And what else could we do doing in this space? And so that's probably something that we haven't spoken about that is really critical for me and has taken time to work through.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing because that is absolutely huge. And in those moments, those really tough moments where you're not sure what is going to happen, it can seem like it could be very easy to be reactionary and go all over the place. And I just love how you say they're your North Star and they keep you coming back and on the same direction. And you're all on the same page as far as how you're going to guide your life in that way. And I think that's just an absolutely beautiful statement and such an important thing for us all to look at. Like, what are our values? Because life just happens. We were on autopilot for so long. And how many times do we actually reflect on what are our core values? What's meaningful in our life? And
And have they changed?
yeah.
And what is that value? How do we live?
Mhm.
How does it show up in our world? Like, what behaviors do we do or what experiences do we have? Or, how do we see it in other people? And like really exploring it.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, and I just going back to you asking the right questions too, is like, again, that and looking further into things that can serve you and just the curiosity. Like, we started out with curiosity and then now talking about the curiosity of what is that and how learning about yourself, going within. I mean, it all connects. Like, there's such a theme in this and that it starts with the inside, who you are, what your values are, and then now moving on forward and learning yourself and how you respond to things that happen in your life and going back to, again, who you are as a person. I think it's just absolutely beautiful message.
It allows you to be agile in the moment. If you can know those pillars within you, if you know your strengths, you know your values, you know what makes you tick, you know what your emotional signature is, like how you react and when you're being reactive, so you can kind of explore that. When you know all of that, this is why personal development work can be so valuable. It allows you to be in, like when you think about sport and someone's in like a mini squat position with their hands in front, ready to go left, right, up, down. It allows you to be in that space so that when adversity comes, going back to that bucket's full, if
Mhm.
you're in the agile position and your bucket is full, if you've like been doing self-care and looking after yourself and nurturing and being kind to yourself and realizing that you're thriving and all of those wonderful things, when you're in that thriving space, you're in the attack position. When adversity comes, you're like, right, I've got a full bucket, I'm
Mhm.
ready to go, and I'm in the attack position and I can move any what way. So
Yeah.
it's like we've got to work on that. We can't
Mhm.
just expect to be there when adversity comes. And sometimes, like in my life, adversity has come and come. We call it the Bondi buses. In Australia, there's most people might have heard of Bondi Beach. It's a really famous beach in Sydney. And if you're waiting at the beach for a bus, there's one every minute. So you don't have to worry if you miss the bus or check the time schedule, because there's always a bus coming. And
Mhm.
sometimes I refer to my adversity in my life as the Bondi buses, because you
Oh,
only got to wait a minute and the next one's coming along.
oh my gosh.
Um, but what's critical is that
Yeah.
you're filling that bucket up
Yeah.
and you're allowing yourself to get back into that agile position, and that you're doing the training for
Mhm.
yourself when you can.
Mhm. Yeah. Can you I know just I know we're kind of running out of time, but I do want you, do you mind just sharing, like, what does your daily routine look like to fill up your
Yeah.
bucket and be in that position where you're ready to take on adversity?
Yeah. Well, we've talked about strengths. If someone hasn't done the 6 human needs quiz, it's free online. Google 6 human needs and have a look at that, because I know that connection and growth are two things that will fill my bucket up straight away. So I
Mhm.
imagine that you might have heard of the teaspoon theory. They use it in chronic illness. I don't know if you've had it on your podcast before about teaspoons,
I've
but
heard that, yeah.
yeah. So if you imagine you have 16 teaspoons a day, use them wisely. Yep. And
Mhm.
it's very relevant in the chronic illness world, which is what
Mhm.
POTS is kind of like that. But so if you think about your well-being bucket, it has 16 teaspoons. It's like, how can I quickly put 4 teaspoons in? Or what activities that I can do that will put 2 teaspoons in, so that if you've stripped out 10,
Mhm.
how do you quickly put 10 back in or 2 back in? So I have levels of like how quickly I can fill my bucket up. So when you say about my daily routine, that structure helps. That might give me 3 teaspoons a day. So I get up at 4:30 a.m. I have a cup of coffee. I do some sort of mindfulness or meditation. And when I say meditation, I'm not talking about 20 minutes on the ground lying on my back. I love that kind of meditation, but in the mornings, I'm like ready to go, right? So it might just be hand on my heart, just observing my breath, just
Mhm.
taking a moment to be fully in the present and letting go of what no longer serves me or what happened yesterday, because I can't change that. So I just take that moment after my cup of coffee, and then I add movement. And with POTS, it started with being able to walk from the bedroom to the kitchen, because that's all I could manage, to walking around the block, to vomiting after I walked 3 blocks. Now I'm up to cycling, and I'm so proud of that. But this morning I got on the bike and I had to get off the bike and lie on the ground with my legs up the wall, because I felt like I was going to faint. So, there are days that it doesn't work for me, but I still show up. I still move. I still give it a crack.
Mhm.
Even on my worst days and I can't move a lot, I still show up at that time and be like, I'm just going to move my body in some way. And I
Mhm.
also get my social kicks. Then I come home, have a shower, get dressed, sit down with my kids for breakfast, see my husband, have that connection piece. And then I start my day. I come into the office, I work out. Okay, of all the things, I run a couple of companies, so I'm very busy in the international podcast, Challenges That Change Us. So I sit down, I say, of everything I've got to do, what are my key priorities for today? If nothing else gets done other than these 3 things, what are they? I draw a line under it and I have the rest of my chore list at the bottom, and it's divided up to today, nice to have, later. Um, And then I get to work. And if I get tired at work, I just take a break because I know in my heart of hearts that I love work. I love what I do. I'm so privileged and fortunate to be so passionate about what I do. So when I'm on, I'm on. And when I'm off, that's okay. So I
Mhm.
might go and have coffee with a friend or go and take an extended lunch break or just take the afternoon off because I'm like, if I'm not in the zone, nothing's going to happen. So that's why it's really important that I can identify what needs to be done. And then I get home in the afternoons. And if I'm really honest with everyone, I'd like to go to bed at 5 p.m. But I do have 3 kids. So I stretch it out to 7 or 7:30 and then I'm pretty done.
Mhm.
The girls come in. It used to be I used to go up and read to them, but then when I got POTS, I couldn't get up the stairs to their bedroom. So now they come and read in with me. So all the kids pile into my bed. We all have a bit of a snuggle, and then they go off. My husband's still awake. They're probably still doing homework or, eating dinner, and I'm like sound asleep.
Mhm.
So that's, but that routine would give me at least 3 teaspoons a day. If I'm consistent, I'm getting 3 teaspoons every day. And if adversity is not hitting or challenges aren't there or problems aren't there to be solved, then maybe those 3 teaspoons are 6 teaspoons the next day and then 9 because I'm consistently filling it up at a slow pace. Then there's like, if I need a really quick fix, it's coffee with a friend, a phone call with a long-term friend, or doing a course, ironically.
Mhm.
Yes, of course, like
Yeah.
growing my mind, being sitting in that nerdy space. Like I love that. It lights my soul up.
Yes.
So if I really need to get 10 teaspoons, even though I might be really tired, I'm like, right, I need to study or I need to do a free course online or I need to read a book that's going to like give me some more strategies or tools and or teach me about business or more about like psychology or whatever it is. So that real thirst for knowledge is I can get a lot of teaspoons, but it takes longer.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yes. No, I love it. And I love how you describe it in those terms as well. And it's just, thank you for sharing that because it just gives a tangible thing for people to be like, okay, let me try that. I haven't, just meditation is one of those things that people are like, I don't have 30 minutes to do it. But I love how you say, like, it's just sitting there, hand on your heart, and just being aware of your breath. Like that's enough. And those little things that you do consistently that add up to become the full bucket is just
Mm.
huge. And for anyone who's
And
listening, you can take bits and pieces of this and see if it works for you. And that's the beauty of it. Again, that curiosity. Love that. Does that work for me? Let me try it.
yeah.
Yeah.
And if you'll notice throughout the whole conversation, I'm able to measure things,
Mhm.
and I think
Yeah.
like whether that be this is something that works for me, this is
Mhm.
something that fills up a teaspoon, this is something that I'm giving 6 weeks for. Like when you can measure it, you can manage it. So ask yourself the question, if I was to put a number against this, what number would that be? If I was
Mhm.
to traffic light this, what traffic light would that be? If I was to put teaspoons against this, like, sometimes it's that measurable aspect that makes it so much easier. We can deal with stuff when we know what it is. When we
Mhm.
know the beast we're in front of, we can kind of deal with it. But when it's an
Yeah.
unknown, it's so hard. Uncertainty, unknown,
Mhm.
fears of what hasn't happened yet. And so often that creeps in because we don't have kind of certainty. So I'm
Mhm.
always trying to bring it back to how can I measure this that I'm feeling, or how can I measure this that I'm concerned about, or how can I find a framework that's going to help me here?
Mhm. I love that because our brain loves evidence. Our brain thrives
Mm,
on evidence. So if we have something we can make a little bit more objective, even though it feels arbitrary, our brain's going to thrive off of that. And especially if we start to notice we're feeling differently, it attributes those consistent habits to how we're feeling. So I just love that you make it measurable and just again, however you want to do it, teaspoons or however it is.
yeah.
Like, I just love that. It doesn't have to be something like, "Oh, I walked for this specific time." Like, it's however you wanna measure that, and I just love that. That makes it
Mm.
so much more applicable to life and just to be able to do it consistently.
And if you need more evidence, ask the questions around the brain. Like I
Mhm,
know how it affects our prefrontal cortex or our
mhm.
amygdala. I've done that
Yeah.
research. I didn't talk about that here on this
Mhm,
podcast, but gratitude absolutely plays a role in our amygdala and what actually happens in our brain. And we know that from a scientific background, from the
mhm,
evidence. So, if you're really driven by science and evidence, maybe that's the area to explore. And that's
mhm,
an example of what you're saying. Just take whatever it is for you. If you can pick one thing from this conversation, and it might not be something I said, it might have sparked something that you thought about that you were
mhm.
going to do. Just one thing.
Absolutely, 100%, and you never know what you're gonna take home, like, what happens to me often is like I'll listen to something 2 weeks later, I'm like, "Oh," and then it comes back, you know? So
Mm.
you don't know when it's gonna hit. Like when you listen to these things or and take in these conversations, books, whatever you take in, you may not notice it immediately, but it's in your brain and it'll come out when it needs to. And that's the most
Mhm.
beautiful thing about it is that something will serve you at some point.
Except when you've had a stroke and you have short-term memory loss.
Mm.
It goes in one ear and out the
Yeah.
other.
Oh,
But that's an example of self-compassion. I have
yeah.
to be okay that I can't
Yeah.
trust that part anymore. But
Right.
I was just laughing because I was like, not how it is for me anymore."
Yeah. And that's the knowingness of knowing
Yes.
yourself. Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Allie, you are absolutely tremendous. Just the epitome of strength, epitome of resilience, which was what most of this conversation was about. And just thank you for sharing your journey and really capturing so many aspects of it and just sharing really just candidly how difficult it was for you. Because for anyone going through this, they're going to go through hard times, and to see where you are today, it's just a beacon of hope for someone who maybe is really going through the storm right now, can't see anything other than what they're going through, and just hopefully something from this conversation sparks in them to just keep going, keep pushing
Mm.
through. So
And
thank
when
you.
you Yeah, and when you said that, I was thinking, if you're in the eye of the storm, sometimes it is pretty ugly as well. Like sometimes the way we act, sometimes the way we are, like it's not always pretty. And we probably didn't really touch on that a lot. So you mentioned it there, and it's very like
Mhm.
I've had the darkest of dark days and the saddest of sad days and the angriest of angriest days. Like my frustration and anger levels at adversity when it comes knocking again can be like, oh, but
Mhm.
it is okay. And it's just working out, like you said, what do you need right now? If you were
Mhm.
really honest with yourself in this moment, what do you need right now? If
Mhm.
you look at it, whether you're in the eye of the storm, the post storm, or the thriving stage, like how does that look different in your world? And have you got to work on that? So thank you so
Yeah.
much. I really hope that some people have taken some value from this.
Mhm. Oh,
It's why we do it,
absolutely.
right? Like just
Hun-
sharing our stories. They're not easy, coming on and
Yeah.
talking about this. It's still hard to talk about
Mhm.
it. And, the imposter syndrome can come up and that questioning, like as if anyone's, I don't know. So yeah, I want to say that too. It's not always easy to come on and talk about.
Yes, and it just the absolute again, the strength that you have to share your story, share those moments, share those really tough, dark moments. I'm just so grateful for you being so open to share this because what a blessing to someone who may be listening right now and is like maybe going through similar things that you've gone through and felt like they were unheard, or maybe they feel very alone and that they were the only one who experienced it. And I guarantee something you've said in this conversation will resonate with someone so deeply and really inspire them to move in a better direction, or at least ask the right questions, or move towards curiosity, or just take that first little step. All those amazing tools that you've shared today, if it can help someone move forward just one little step, what a gift. So thank
Well,
you.
thank you for taking the time and being so patient with us finding a time.
Yeah.
We've had lots of cracks at trying to get on this. So thank you for carving out the space, and thank you for
Absolutely.
everyone that's listening for giving up your
Yes.
time today and staying with us through this whole conversation.
Absolutely. And for someone who wanted to connect with you and maybe just wants to reach out to you or find you or your resiliency program, how can they get into that and get into your world?
Well, probably the best way, especially if you're overseas, is through Challenges That Change Us, our podcast. And we also have a Facebook group, Challenges That Change Us. I would love to personally invite you all in there. We do lots of little tips and hacks and stories and behind the scenes. And, the podcast is really about exactly what we've spoken about today, sharing people's stories of adversity and how they navigated it. And I try with each guest to kind of ask questions like you have today, like, what did you do and what worked and what didn't work? And, where's the human part of that? And like, yes, we were all under, those kind of conversations. So it's actually a very similar podcast to what we've done here today. So I would love each of you to come across and shout out to me, like say hi when you come into the Facebook group, DM me and say hi. you
Yes,
know?
Definitely reach out to Ali. You're amazing. And I will definitely post the link to your Facebook group so people can connect with you, and definitely follow her podcast, subscribe to it, listen to it. If you want inspiration, want hope, want to hear these amazing stories of people who've overcome adversity, definitely check it out.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
And again, thank you so much again for everyone who's listened. And please subscribe to the podcast, share it with a friend. Don't hold this to yourself. And if you know someone who's going through maybe the storm or the eye of the storm and they're really in a tough place, this may be the conversation they need to hear just to help them move out of it a little bit quicker. So thank you again. And thank you everyone for listening. Hey there. Thanks for listening to this episode. I hope it serves you well to start rewiring your brain to create the life you desire. If you found value in this, please share it with a friend and tag me on Facebook or Instagram at Dr. Kelly Kessler.